Welcome to the Adoption Curve, the show where we explore how leading organizations are transforming their approach to turn technology adoption into a strategic advantage. In each episode, we'll sit down with a learning and enablement practitioner to get their inside story on how they're helping their organizations adopt and maximize their technology investments. Let's dive into today's episode. Megan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. I know we've talked a couple of times kind of offline. It's been very helpful to be able to get some of our thoughts together on more of a formalized conversation. I didn't want to dive too deep when we initially spoke. I wanted to make sure we were recording so we could get some of this stuff out there because you were dropping a bunch of pieces of wisdom that I think were worthwhile to share with a broader audience. Appreciate you taking some time to be here. I think by way of an introduction, it'd be helpful if we could just get a little bit about your background just to kind of level set on this conversation.
Sure thing. I am the CEO and founder at TorranceLearning. We've been around for, 23 years now. And actually got my start in large shared service center processing operations, right? One of those happened to be a learning management system, and that kind of got the ball rolling, right? So centralizing, standardizing, automating payroll and accounts payable and stuff. And the next one, they're like, here you go, it's learning, Megan. I'm like, okay, great. But I had training before that in instructional design, change management, those kinds of things. So a learning management system seemed to make sense, right? A whole lot of things happened in between. And right now we're I like to describe ourselves as a full stack learning team, strategy, design, development, software, platforms, data, and then we wrapper all that with professional development for our peers in the space around how to do all those things better.
Amazing. I love that. Full stack is a good way to put it for the full package you're bringing to market. I really like that. I was also very curious about, from your background, standing in that kind of change management, large consulting, large projects, that world, and this concept of adoption. Obviously, we talk about a lot on this particular podcast. How do you think about that, just broadly speaking, digital adoption, the concept, and L&D? I think there's a lot of synergy between them, but I'd love to just level set on where you see that initially.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So I think there's a Venn diagram. You have change management, the process folks, you have the IT folks who are rolling things out, and you have learning and development. And when all those three come together and coordinate on that rollout, I think that's magic. And everybody plays to their strengths. Otherwise, everybody's trying to do somebody else's job, and maybe they're fine at it, but maybe they call the other teams in late. And so when L&D can be at the table early, often L&D is the ones that we call late. Change and IT are there. And then like, hey, we have a thing, we should call L&D. I think we have something to offer earlier in as part of that. But usually, right, by the time L&D gets involved, one of our first questions when we kick off a project is, tell me about your change process. Where do we fit in? What else is happening so we know what's going on?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, we talk a lot about trying to drill down into a tactical approach for some of these things. And I find that the conversation almost always leads to this broader people management issue of cross-departmental communication and facilitating change at scale, which is not really an L&D problem. This is just an organizational problem. It's funny how much of a theme that is in all these conversations we have, both with the customer base in the field, but even on this show as well. It almost always comes down to that, the order of operations and some of the cadencing. Do you have any tactical recommendations for empowering L&D to get a little closer to that seat of the table? Because they are often left out or they're brought in as retroactive. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I've been thinking about this a lot, right? One of the things you need to know about me is I generally I have a hard time saying no to things, right? So cool thing, yeah, sure. So I lead courses at eCornell and in their executive development stack. And I teach a class that's part of their change management course, and it's on navigating power relationships. And it's brought so much light into my L&D practice, because what I'm seeing is that, L&D tends to be a lower power department within an organization, right? Change is that's a strategic department. IT has gained in the last couple of decades incredible power in the organization, right? And all three of those are cost centers. You could maybe put change, not, depends on where it is, but those are cost centers. But even among the cost centers, L&D has a lower power relationship. So when I say cost center, we cost the company money. Ideally, we are offering value, but they're not selling those services. Company sells its widgets out of operations, and it's got sales and marketing. Those are all revenue generating functions, and they tend to have, because of that revenue position, more power in the organization. So what does a low power organization or department do? We build strategic networks to the extent that we can be building a network with those people who are likely to bring us projects or call us up, and they know what we're doing. They rely on us. We're valuable to them. Earlier on in the project, they will think to bring us in. Then when we show up, we need to bring our business acumen. We need to be ready to play. And if we show up and say, well, that's going to be a 24-week development process, and we're going to use the Addy process, Debbie Downer doesn't get asked to the party very often. So there's a love campaign here.
Really interesting. I haven't really thought about the concept of sort of internal networking proactively heading up to the big ask that's coming retroactively. So
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense for sure.
Yeah. One of my clients a few years ago, right? So we teach a 2-day agile project management for workshop, right? And part of that workshop is, what do you do next? And one of the next things that one of those clients did was they built a deck that said, and they had an internal marketing campaign, and they went out to all the business sponsors in the organization. They said, hey, we're L&D. We're doing something different now. Here's what you can count on us for. Here's how to engage us. We want you to call us early, and we're going to, can we set up meetings every once in a while just to find out what's going on in your world so we're ready to support you when you're ready? Imagine the power of that. And even from a referral product, it's like internal sales and internal biz dev.
That's a fantastic call out. I really like that. And this is certainly not just true for L&D, right? We have this in finance and RevOps and all these other functions that effectively own a skill set and a level of execution in the organization that is supportive of other departments. And so we'll often find that they get looked at as a stick in the mud because they're brought in to just execute what I've asked you to do, right? And no one wants to be told what to do. They want to be a partner in this, but the people who need the thing to be done are like, look, I don't have time for that sort of thing. So that approach of, hey, I'm going to internal roadshow how we can help and be your point of contact. Boy, what a olive branch that is internally. I have to imagine that had great results.
It's fantastic. That was a really good power move on her part. Not power move like a bad thing, like a really good influence move. How about that? Power has an icky phrase to it. And here's the thing, right? The common complaint among L&D people is that we are order takers. We're like, I don't want us to order take. Well, you know what? I'm not blaming us. I'm not going to blame the victim, right? But we're a part of it. When you're a low power organization, how do you make or a low power person, right? How do you make other people like you? You do whatever it is they ask you to do. So, they say jump, you say, how high, boss? Right? Over time, that builds a dynamic, and we've kind of built ourselves into that spot. I'm not saying we're calling the shots. I'm not saying we're setting company strategy, but if we can be in earlier, we can be more effective for everybody.
Absolutely. And it also, they want to loop in that perspective when it's going to take 26 weeks. You haven't given me enough resources and it's going to take too much time. And they just start laying out all the Debbie Downer-ness of this, like you mentioned. Nobody feels like that is a partnership that they want to bring to the table, right? But when you are being something that is proactive, you're showing that you're here to help and that you have resources and you have a perspective and you're looking to level them up and raise them up in some way. That's how we can get to that point where those new projects are being strategized with L&D or enablement. Yes. We're starting to see this at very early stages of this with some of the AI tools, just trying to say like, hey, there's a lot going on and the speed is so quick. Hopefully, if we involve L&D and enablement as early as possible, like during the evaluation of a new large-scale tech stack rollout or an ERP or some kind of major transformation, that they can help with like, okay, well, what does success look like? This is not just something that we make a video for down the road and hope people get it, but actually strategically develop, maybe with the vendor, right? Are you seeing any organizations that are taking that level of approach with like, hey, we're getting to almost the decision-making process or the evaluation stage?
I'm not seeing a lot of it, but I'm absolutely looking for it and advocating for it, right? So one of the things I'm doing right now, actually, not this moment, but I'm writing a book on L&D's role in AI implementations, but really it could be L&D's role in any implementation. And how does L&D play? How do we show up? How do we support these initiatives? What questions do we bring? And really thinking about how we can position ourselves to be of use in those cases. And the flip side is, right, nobody likes to be brought to a meeting in which you didn't really need to be there. And sometimes I hear people say, yes, they bring me into meetings so early. I'm like, yes, they bring you into meetings so early. You get to see what's coming. And yes, I know we all have meeting fatigue, but that's your opportunity for internal biz dev, right? That's your opportunity. That's your love campaign right there. I've now said love twice in the same podcast. It's a little bit uncharacteristic for me, I'll say.
I think I agree with you. I think I echo that same sentiment of what we're trying to change other people's minds, and we're trying to build some level of rapport. It's going to take creativity at the end of the day, right? We've got to kind of get out of our comfort zone. I'd be curious, especially with you kind of writing the book and thinking about these topics, and writing a book on AI, as we talked about, trying to stay ahead of the curve there sounds like a daunting task, to say at least. But I think some of the frameworks and principles are probably timeless about how we're approaching something like adoption, or being strategic for how we partner internally. Do you have any tactics on maybe what the L&D person brings to that meeting, so they're not just like, I'm too early and I'm taking notes? Do you think about what prep they might be able to do, sets of questions they can ask without being like too judgmental on where this is going to unravel, but a little bit more of a asking leading questions that are showing that we're engaged and involved and care about the outcome?
I think one of the things that L&D does really well is we advocate for the learner. We advocate for the user, right? Where other components of the organization are advocating for, right? So IT will advocate for backups and security and privacy and a rigorous structure. Changes and innovation are going to be advocating for the business solution and the overall process design and integration, I hope, with other components in the organization. And the L&D folks have that, like, what's in it for the individual who is sticking their neck out and learning something new, has to adopt something. You're good at one thing, and suddenly we're going to change that one thing that you're good at. I mean, you're good at a lot of things, not you personally. Everybody's good at, right? I'm doing my job. I am being successful, and you're about to change the entire tool set I use to be successful. I am going to be less successful. That is hard for me. I need support. And that's what instructional designers, that's how we're wired. I actually, I have this joke called instructional designers ruin everything. It's because we see the world from a different dimension, and we can bring that to the table. At the same time, we need to be showing up knowing that all good projects change. All good projects from start to finish, and implementing new technology is that's the one that's the one we all see, right? I was going to say no exception. That's absolutely an understatement, right? And so sometimes L&D folks will complain, well, I'm trying to build training on the system and they're changing the system. Yes. Do you want them to roll out something that doesn't work? Do you want them to roll out something that failed in user acceptance testing? Do you want them to accept a subpar process just so it doesn't change for your training? Right. So we have to participate in that and understand and be resilient to that.
Very well said. Yeah, that is always a massive balancing act to do. We work with a lot of technology companies as well, and they have this customer-facing challenge of, customer ed is running as fast as they can to keep up with product development, which is as up and to the right as possibly in any department. And CE's trying to catch up and oh my God, this thing's changing and the interface looks, and they're not complaining so much that the evolution and the change is happening. It's so much that they want to make sure that the content and the learning can stay up to date. It's a very valid point for sure, but you have to make sure it's balanced with but we need to constantly be evolving, because the process is going to iterate and change and develop and get better. That's the entire goal and ethos of learning, right? So we can get to a better future state. So not an easy problem to solve for, but if there's at least alignment that this is there, I think that is a good starting point.
Yeah. And what's funny, I think as I start to socialize, all good projects change, all interesting projects change, all strategic, if your project doesn't change start to finish, that might be because nobody cares about it. Not necessarily, but good projects change. And I think one of the things we've been talking about, Sean, up until now has been, right, so we have this LLAMA process, this agile process that we created. It's based on software development's agile processes, but it's modified for an instructional design context. And we've been, gosh, it's been, I think, 13 years since the first iteration of the first book, right? And so, and it's been really, really popular. In fact, had I known it would be so popular, I might not have called it llama, because it's kind of a joke. And now people are like, oh, there's lots of llamas. We were llamas before llamas were cool. I think penguins were cool, Holstein cows and dinosaurs when we came up with llama. So llama was really the thinking behind, like, how do we in L&D take an agile approach? How do we have a process that is really resilient to change? How do we have a process that could line up with or adjacent to, like either within lockstep or one sprint behind our software friends, our implementation friends, right? And how we do that. And we spent a lot of time talking about llama as a process. And then just in the last 2 years or so, we've really been leaning into what we call design for change, which is the stuff itself. And our CE friends, like, that's exactly what they need, but they're not the only ones who are supporting a learning environment that is constantly shifting out from underneath you in good ways.
Totally. Yeah. And that's where I wanted to take this conversation next personally. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the kind of llama framework, design for change, how you think about that. I think maybe this agile framework people are familiar with, like you said, from a technical standpoint in software development or project management. This is new to me too. Megan, I can use some context clues, but I'd love for you to spend some time kind of unpacking some of this a little bit more.
Yeah. So it was interesting. 2006, 2008, my team was struggling. We were, like many people in learning and development, did not have a deep project management ethos. Despite me having grown up with in Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture, right? Which is, we just kind of like soaked in project management from the start. We were up till 3:00 in the morning the entire week before we delivered everything. It was on time. The clients were delirious and we were exhausted, and it's not healthy or sustainable for people or families or anything, right? And I had a bunch of friends here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, that were software developers and some very early adopters in the Agile for software space. And they seemed to have their stuff together. So I soaked up everything I could from them. And we implemented, it was about 2009, we did our first Agile project. We implemented that. We were like, this is amazing, except for these 4 things. Or this is amazing, and I'm just going to fake this thing over here. And then what we realized is the things that didn't work were the things that were unique to instructional design projects. So we then said, well, instead of trying to force fit or fake something, let's take what we know already from instructional design and plug it in to the overall Agile framework. And our Agile roots are more in the extreme programming side, not the Scrum side. We were able to make a fit that made a ton of sense. And then we looked at it and I thought, well, we've made so many modifications. Can we still call this Agile? Like, can I still go to my Agile friends and like, hey, we're doing Agile, but we do it different. So I'm not kidding you. It was a beautiful summer afternoon in July in 2012. And we mapped it all out on whiteboards and we said, is this still Agile? And somebody said, well, it's a lot like Agile. And we're instructional designers, so we make acronyms, so it's easy to remember. And so somebody says LA, and somebody finished it and said MA. And so a lot like Agile Management Approach, right? So we made a logo and poof, it's a thing. And it helps us take some of the same, right? We apply some design thinking and some backwards design up front, some user research with iterative approaches and an iterative mindset, and just an entire project wrapped around how do we adapt to and harness change because we know it's coming. And that was really Agile. We've no kidding had clients come to us and say, of all the vendors we looked at, we chose you because we are going to change our minds a lot and we knew you wouldn't pitch a fit. Great. So we've been doing that, and that's been super successful to us. We love it. Our clients love it. Our people love it. But what we weren't looking at that's the process. What we weren't looking at is what we're actually building. If I know this thing I'm actually building is going to change, its underlying content or objective is going to change, how do I build? And the thing is that we have all these fantastic tools that allow us to make all sorts of bells and whistles and fancy branched things with media and layers and states and all this stuff. And we look like heroes when we build that stuff. And we build something that is incredibly difficult to change. And if I have to change it every 2 weeks, I am just painting myself into a corner. And that's what design for change is all about. So how do we seek out changes and figure out what's going to change? How do we build in a way that is resilient to change? And I will give you a hint, it's not by building it really hard. And then how do we support our people knowing that all this change is going on?
Yeah, can we dive into a couple examples? I'd love to just kind of better understand this myself. So, rudimentary example, let's say I'm bringing on a new CRM, Salesforce, a HubSpot, just a rudimentary example here. We got, revenue functions, there's operational functions, there's IT functions, all these different things going on. Enablement learning and training comes into the fold and says, like, help me make sense of this. How would something like LLAMA and this kind of design for change, how are you sort of applying that concept? I'm trying to think about the kind of tangible of one of these types of projects.
Yeah. So I think there's two things. Right? So Llama's going to have us lining up the training change program or the training program and that project plan with the software rollout plan, and building in lots of opportunities for cross-pollination and iteration and learning and tweaking to make sure that it means the instructional design team probably is a fantastic group of people to include in user acceptance testing and to have training included in the user acceptance testing, right? And in unit testing along the way, anything we can do, and build that way, and build, if you're building out a particular, how we're tracking leads and converting them into opportunities or vice versa, right? And you're building that first, then let's build the training for that first and, kind of matching those up, right? So then the design for change component says a couple things, right? So first is I'm seeking out change. I'm going to make sure, if I'm not already, I am in the know with what's coming down the pike and what's baked and done and what's still open to change. I'm asking people on a regular basis, what's changed since I last saw you, right? Because everybody's off doing their work and they're not thinking about the training people. That's okay. We're going to keep asking, and we're going to keep asking so much that at some point we get to a team who cannot have a meeting with us without first saying what's changed, because they're so used to us showing up. What's changed since we last met, right? So building that expectation, building those relationships, and asking what of this is baked and what's still moving, right? We're then going to build those things that are moving or late in the game as late as possible. And because the entire system isn't changing right up to the end, there's just pieces of it, right? So let's be mindful and intentional about that. Then we get into building for change. That's where we build lightly the things most likely to change. What's not going to change? Our overall perspective on why we're doing the overall architecture of this, what we call it, those things. Build hard, make videos of the CEO, make all sorts of stuff, make it high polish, right? The concept of different types of records, the concept overall. What's going to change all the time? Where we put a particular button, what it's called, what the drop down items are in, right? In a particular field. Don't bake that into your training. If you don't have to show it, don't. Put it in text. Put it in a screenshot rather than video. Don't put it into a branch thing. Don't build it. Instead of baking it into training, have part of the training be, great, everybody, now we're going to go out to system documentation. Why do we go to system documentation? System documentation is the stuff that's updated most frequently, and you're going to want to go out there anyway, so we're just going to teach you how to do it in training. Then we're not even building it into training, so there's nothing to change. And we're building better training because we're teaching people to do what we want them to do, which is go look at the sysdocs. And then there's the brace for change. In a situation like that, we know when our peak periods are going to be. Right before rollout, we know, and right after rollout, we know those are the tricky times. So leaders are going to clear the decks every other project. Get it done early, push it off late, make sure we're not trying to juggle too many different flaming bowling balls all at once. We're then going to, ditch meetings, right? So we have a regular, at TorranceLearning, regular all hands staff meeting. Right. And there's a business section of the meeting, and then we call it the meat. And the meat is where we have like a guest speaker or a special topic, or we see something or whatever. And when times are heavy, we have vegan meetings. No meat. It's just what you got to do. You get in, you get your stuff, and you get out. There's no meat. Right. So how do you slim down all the other expectations? And then how do you take care of people when you know it's hitting the fan? We buy them food, we take care of their families, do whatever it takes to help people get through the crunch times.
First off, I'd like permission to steal the vegan versus meat meeting because
totally.
I run our team sessions with our revenue teams and our global our more group team, and I would love to be able to have some optionality, and I find that vernacular might deliver quite well. So I might steal that. This is fantastic. I think you covered a lot in that framework. I'm just going to pull off a couple things that came top of mind for me. One, because I do work closely often with some of our product and dev folks, especially in partnerships. We have a lot of connections and integrations. And so, it gets me into technical conversations that I have no business being in, but have to liaison. I can see what I would like to underscore is that you're calling out being a strategic oversight of this entire project, from how it's being scoped to how it plans on being finished. It is not what is the minimally viable thing I can just do right now so that nobody messages me right now, and we'll just put it off. It's not procrastination. That might be a weird takeaway from what you said.
Yeah.
This is something I've seen. MVP and V1 and all these sort of terms are fantastic, but it's not an excuse to procrastinate. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of criticisms of Agile in general, right? We throw out an MVP and then we just spend the rest of the project polishing a turd, to borrow the phrase, right? Or we have a version 1 and we never come back to it. And I think when the plan is that we will come back to this, right? We plan to come back to this. This is version 1. It doesn't mean that version 1 is sloppy. And it certainly doesn't mean that version 1 is late, right? I'm not talking about version 1 of the software. I'm talking about, like that V1, right? And I want to be in the know early enough to be able to make that an intentional decision. So you're right. It's not procrastinating. It's not tactical. It's actually very strategic. When are we doing this?
Yeah. That was really the call out I wanted to make here, because I could see that, especially for smaller teams who are resource strapped, the time is spent, it sounds like, on the front end scoping strategically across the org, that we're coming back to this, but what is the lightest version of this that we can get out so that when this changes, we can bolt more on, we can expand, we can make it flexible. The nature of our product is very much designed for that light lift. I think that's actually why we've got the traction we've gotten, because there's certainly a hard way and a laborious way to scale up something that could win an Oscar from a learning perspective. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing, but one button changes and the thing, is a house of cards, right? So that sort of stuff is where we're very much on the, thin, fast, light, and get out the door. So I really like that framework. The other piece I wanted to call out is, how do you coach folks on the asking for what's coming to change? That could be a tricky conversation of not what's changed, that squeaky wheel and being an annoyance versus strategic business partner. Any coaching around how to actually have those asks?
Yeah, I think there's two things from the tactical perspective, is just to be aware of your own personal tone and vibe as you're asking that question, right? And just what's on deck for you all next? What's changing? What can you help me help you? Right. I am here to serve. Point me in the right direction. So there's that tacticalness. I was talking with a team this morning, and we were talking about how do you ask why? Well, sometimes with the 5 whys framework and stuff, which is fantastic. I actually taught the 5 whys framework this morning. But when you ask why do you do something, sometimes it comes across like you're challenging them. And it's kind of but what are the signals that make you take that approach? That's basically a why question. It has 5 more words in it, but it doesn't feel as defensive. Right. So, or doesn't make somebody feel as defensive. I think the other thing, though, gets back to having that strategic conversation. So up front, what we're doing during a project kickoff, or as soon as we can get involved, is we map out, right? We use a lot of Kathy Moore's action mapping, right? We say, kind of map out all the things that we want people to do. Great. Now, which of these is the most subject to change? Which of these has the most disagreement about it? Which of these do we not have to teach for whatever reason? And have that conversation up front, and then make sure that you let folks know that you're going to keep coming back and finding out what's changed. And it's building that expectation up front. And the first time is a lot harder than any other time is going to be.
I like that. How about any thoughts on the communication of this more agile framework for leadership, or trying to make sure you're still getting some quick wins in some way to show that we're making progress, but we're building something that we can move and be agile with as the project develops?
Well, so here's the thing. Baked into an iterative approach is an opportunity for quick wins. So, right? So somebody calls you up and says, hey, I need a thing. And you're thinking, wow, that's a 26-week project. And they say, great, I want it in 4. Well, you've just found your first pilot tester. You've just found somebody who is willing to take your MVP, right? It still has to be V, right? I want to make sure that we are double underlining the V for viability in an MVP, right? But we take that MVP, they're likely to give you feedback. And then you learn for the thing that maybe you'll get your 26 weeks, but quite honestly, I'm sorry, no L&D person ever feels like they have enough time or resources or budget to do the job they think they ought to do. We should just get over it. And I like, that's just some really tough love. We should get it right. So, but those early MVPs, those quick wins, find ways to do that. That might not be a full on e-learning sparkly thing. That might be, right, a screen walkthrough. That might be a great job aid. That might be a quick video or an email. Does that work? Right. And I think that's an opportunity to make, I'm going to actually make an additional point here, right? It's an opportunity to say, hey, we did exactly what you needed in exactly the time frame you wanted. Here's it is, right? We've got this quick win. We didn't overthink it. We're going to learn from this for the next iteration, right? So that you have then a golden opportunity. You roll out that MVP, you find out what users think, you get that feedback and you use that for the next one, rather than our 26-week project, unfortunately, often didn't involve users until week about 23 or 24. So now we've got users involved in week 4 in our little example here. I think the other thing is to expect that even things that got signed off on early, or you told me this, expect that they will change. You can even expect that your MVP, you toss the entire thing aside because everything's changed. And I'm human too, right? That's frustrating. I just built this thing and we're going to throw it out. All right. We just built this thing and it's all, but you said 4 weeks ago, but we've changed for the better along the way. Who am I to say what's better or not, right? Like, we've changed, the business changed. Great. Let's go. Let's figure it out. And I take the energy I was going to say, but you said 4 weeks ago, and I put that into making the next 4 weeks iteration work.
Again, back to zooming out though with strategy, right? If you're misaligned from the start that you're just in this little bubble to make these learning assets, and that is really your only function to this, you're setting yourself up to, one, just be let down, right? Because the nature of things, even the most strategic of business initiatives, is going to change, to your point. And what a better way to build trust from, that initial point you made around like the roadshow internally of, I'm here to help you, in that olive branch experience, saying, I'm going to design learning as light as I can so you get stuff really quickly and it's something you can use right away. That because things are going to change, not because you're not good at your job, but because the reality of how life works. And I just want to make sure that we can iterate together. And that's the teamwork piece. Like, that almost sets the tone from the beginning, so that when things come down, even if your counterpart doesn't believe that the change is going to come, it's going to come. And so you can be the one who, well, I built it so that I could tweak this button and move this thing here. And we can divulge that a little bit more down the road. So that's why I think that strategy piece is fundamental here.
Yeah. And sometimes, Sean, it doesn't change. Sometimes it doesn't change. Actually, I thought a former client of ours called. I'd never met this man before. We built a course, I think it was 8 years ago. And we knew that a component of that course would change every year. Right. And so we didn't build, like, none of the questions say what number is on line 47 of 42, right? Like, we just knew. We said, go out and find the most current document, bring that back in. And we knew some things weren't going to change. We knew there were certain components of that document that would always exist in that document. And so we said, go find that. Read through that. Did you find things like this? Right. So we intentionally built this thing to live for a long time. It's been up and running for 8 years. They're still happy with it. They actually came back, like, they need to update some branding and a couple of other things, but the course itself still works 8 years later, which I thought was pretty awesome. Think about the value they got there.
That is being designed for change up front, right? So as much as you left out the pieces that hopefully would be the variables in that scenario, right? And so, like, what a value he's getting out of that, and who's the first person he calls to fix that thing when he needs help, right? It's like,
yeah,
what an ROI on time spent if he can get 8 years out of the same piece of learning.
Exactly.
You might be putting yourself out of a job there, Megan, but
I'm not a very good capitalist, but yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And the trust that builds, and the know-how, it feels like you're bringing in insight into that as a partner in this initiative, that, like, hey, this is how I've seen this happen before. And if it doesn't change, fantastic. But odds are we want to be nimble with the ever-changing rollout that's going to happen. From the adoption lens too, I'd love to know what you've seen from your experience on this, because especially rolling out like a new piece of technology or trying to drive home existing technology that's being underutilized, it's often the first time the organization is figuring this out. So like you by definition don't know what you don't know. And so building this comprehensive 26-week build out just so the stakeholders and end users get in and go like, yeah, that's not how we're going to use it, is kind of a fool's errand to start with. So it almost makes the most sense to be able to not just design from a blank page and hope you encapsulate every possible scenario, but just kind of get started and let it be a living, breathing thing. Has that been your experience as you've seen when they're using this kind of agile framework for something like a large rollout or transformation?
Yeah, and if you think about often in a large transformation, there is a pilot group, there's your champion group, right? And we're seeing it happen right now in AI, right? With organizations rolling that out, the large ones, right? The small ones are like, oh, you've got ChatGPT on your computer, or even worse, oh, get ChatGPT. But the large organizations, whether it's AI or any other software, right? They've got the project team, and the project team uses it first, and then they've got their champions, their super users, right? They get it next, and that's that opportunity to build that in and to build in that momentum and learn from them, what you then use to roll out to everybody. Right. And often it's not a project team, pilot team, everybody. It's project team, pilot team, this region, that department, right? You're learning at each one of these, and ideally moving with the organizations the components of the organization that have the most compelling reason to move in that order. Right. And everybody's on board. And the pieces of the organization, they're like, yeah, I don't think that's useful for us, or I don't really want it, or I do something totally different, unique. And I've got my own special snowflake version over here. You move them last. So you've learned a bunch along the way before you get to them. And you've decided maybe I do or don't need to. I know a lot of organizations leave China for last because China has special technical considerations. Let's get everybody else stable. China's doing their own thing for now. We will figure out China later. Great. I think that makes a lot of sense. And the learning team can be in lockstep with that, learning with the rest of the organization as we roll that out.
I think this is really powerful. Last closing thought on that from an agile standpoint. We have a small team here. We're a startup ourselves, but I do all the training for our revenue teams. I find that go comprehensively onboard and get every single piece of information that this employee may need to thrive in their role is a super daunting task for the person who has to build the training. And this clicking mouse cursor of like, oh my, okay, let me just like put this person on their career path now is very overwhelming. So I find that focusing on the large things that won't change, like the corporate culture and our strategy and our customer groups and these sort of things, are where a lot of the value comes in. And I find context is one of the most helpful things for me as a content creator for training content, because when I'm in the thing and I'm sitting on a call and the discovery goes a little wonky, or execution of X, Y, and Z is like, we don't really, that's not very well. Okay, now I'm motivated to build that piece of training. When the pilot group is out and something breaks like very obviously right in front of you, like, oh, cool, yeah, got it. Got to make a quick job aid for that. There's a motivation behind that, and there's like hyper context. I find designing in a vacuum separately ahead of time, or just again trying to plan for what might come, it's just not a very helpful exercise. And your brain, like for me at least, context is like very powerful. It's like a conversation lubricant, right? You can just like jump in and go. I'm curious if that echoes what you're describing here.
Completely, right? I mean, I think when we start from that big picture, whether it's for ourselves or for our learners, we start with that. Here's the big picture. Here's the context, so that when something goes wrong, I understand, is it a big thing or a little thing? Should I go fish for myself? Should I ask somebody for help? How do I support that? And I think that without context, you can't do that. I'm not into can't, maybe is a bit strong word, but it's a whole lot easier to get it right if you have that context, right? Whether you're the learning person and you have the context, right? I'm a huge fan of learning people understanding their organization's technology and business model and how we make money, right? And so that gives context for everything we do, as the same as we're rolling out a piece of software. Here's what this software does. Here's what its purpose is. here are the things you have to do, and here's how to go fish for yourself.
Beautifully said. As we start to wind down here, I also wanted to call out something you kind of mentioned to me in passing, but we wanted to leave for this conversation, which was this kind of technology canvas or implementation canvas that you had described. I believe it was at an event you mentioned, and there was some great takeaways for that. I'd love for you to, if you could spend a couple minutes just kind of explaining maybe how that happened and what that piece of content or asset was.
Yeah, it was a whole lot of fun. So Yasmin Gutierrez, Matt Gertzen, and I got assigned to a team together, which was a fantastic opportunity for all of us to work together. We otherwise probably wouldn't have crossed paths too much. Matt and I had crossed paths, but and the charge was come up with something hands-on for technology, learning technology implementation. And we were three very busy people and kind of like, how are we going to pull? I don't even know what you all talk about. Like, what do you do? Who are you? Right. And Yasmin came up with this idea to riff on the idea of the business model canvas, but to bring in and make a technology implementation canvas. But part of the design and the beauty of what it was she was doing is that she was approaching it from a change management perspective and bringing in her change management expertise. Matt was bringing it in his strategic expertise, and I was bringing in my tactical, like, how do you roll out software expertise? And what we did was we built a 3-part canvas, which was literally just we each brought a thing and had a single graphic designer make a thing together, but it flowed, right? So it started with strategy, looked at change, and looked at tactics of the actual rollout. And then what we did was we led a session where we had everybody come up with something they either are or want to be implementing in their organization and work through the canvas. And we printed out, I mean, they were big. Like, it was an 18 by 24 inch poster that we printed out for everybody, and they were writing in their stuff. And the thinking is, right? The thinking is you do this with a team and you fill in and you answer all these questions. There's like 24 questions by time or more by the time you were done. You do this with a team, and then you step back and you say, what are we missing? What are our next steps? What holes, which questions couldn't we answer? Where do we need to go bring more people in? And it starts to gel everybody on a common vision for what we're doing and a way for us to identify what we might want to do going forward. It was super fun. I had a fantastic opportunity to work with them, and we just got feedback. This was at ATD Technology 25. We just got session feedback, and people loved the session, which just, I mean, that makes my day. I mean, one woman like wrote a whole bunch of stuff and was talking about how this was something they were going to use and take forward and share with other people. Like, dang, that's why we do this work.
Absolutely. Those are the best when you can really just put pen to paper and help people in that way. That's fantastic. I took a quick look at this too. If you're comfortable with it, we'd love to share it with the audience as well.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of value in here. I have the project, the business, the people, the breakdowns of those things. There's a series of questions. And sort of, to me, it seems like kind of a segmentation to kind of get a pulse on where we are, what we're trying to achieve with this thing, who are the people that are involved, maybe challenging some of those assumptions. And then it sounds like from your perspective, you were bringing kind of the tactical side. As we wrap up, any other tactical pieces from that session that were useful or worth sharing?
You know, a lot of people were really excited about, it's a concept we created a few years ago. We worked with one of our LMS vendors, and we were deploying this LMS, and we spent a lot of time thinking about, like, how are we going to go about doing it? And we thought, well, let's bring our agile approach. And so we created the vanilla iteration, the chocolate sprinkles iteration, and the hot fudge sundae iteration. And so, you know, vanilla is out of the box. That's your project team. You just implement it. And then from that, you figure out what your requirements for the next iteration are. So chocolate sprinkles is then just a few little things, a few more people, more bells and whistles. And so I'm a firm believer that we don't know all the requirements for our software when we put out our RFP for our software. We derive requirements as we see what it can do and what we're actually going to do it, right? So how do we build that in and make it normal? Right. And so that's that step. So people were like, that was exciting and cool for people. So more ice cream for everybody. After your vegan meetings, you can have ice cream.
As a person with a perpetual sweet tooth, that does my heart good. So if I can blend in learning technology with ice cream, yeah, I think we've succeeded.
We got it.
This is fantastic. We will definitely package some of this up here with some of your insights and share this template. I think this could be really, really useful for folks. And I just love the ability to just have real tangible and tactical conversations around what we're trying to achieve and break these things down. Again, just even in the planning stages, I think that's really helpful. This is fantastic. Megan, I think you offered a ton for us to kind of unpack here. So thank you for taking some time to share all that out. Anything else that we missed or that you wanted to touch on from a tactic or kind of a template standpoint?
Let's include the Design for Change article that came out with the Learning Guild. And so we can include a link to that too, because that gives just a high level look at what that might be. We actually offer a workshop. We have an Agile workshop. We have a Design for Change workshop. So we dig in deep, but that article gets everybody something quick and easy for free.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll definitely include that as well. Megan also included a ridiculous amount of resources in her All the Things document, which was fantastic. That was really helpful for us to be able to get a pulse on who you are, but also all the value we can bring in here. So I think we touched on a good amount of that to get people a little bit excited a bit. And then we have some resources to pull off. I would highly recommend anybody check out any of those workshops, because I think diving deep is the answer here. So yeah, amazing. Megan, where can folks find more about you publicly? What's the best place to send folks?
2 places. So one is the website, TorranceLearning.com, Torrance with an A, kind of like Southern California, but it's my name. And the other is on LinkedIn. That's a good place to find me if you can't remember the URL.
Excellent. Okay. We'll make sure to link to all those things. Megan's a great follow. So sharing a bunch of wisdom out there. So thank you again for being here. This is really helpful.
Hey, thanks so much. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Adoption Curve. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and want more content like this, I highly recommend subscribing to our newsletter, where we break down insights, frameworks, and templates from our guests on each show. To access, go to iorad.com/newsletter. Also, make sure you subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. If you could, we'd also love it if you could leave us a 5-star review if you've enjoyed and got value out of today's conversation. The Adoption Curve is produced by IORAD, the tool that helps thousands of companies make interactive tutorials in seconds. They're shareable in all the tools you use every day. We'll see you on the next episode.